Don't scream. Please, my mother begged. Her hands trembled as she gripped mine. I nodded, trying to hide the fear rising in my chest. But then I turned toward the shadowed corner, and he was there, still, silent, watching us. And his smile, it was just like Dad's smile. That was 3 years ago. I was 15, and I thought that night was the worst thing that could ever happen to our family. I was wrong. What I discovered later about my father's death and the man in our living room would shatter everything I believed about my own mother. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the people we trust most are the ones capable of the most unthinkable acts. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday morning in October. I was getting ready for school when Detective Morrison called our house. My mother's face went white as she listened. When she hung up, she turned to me with eyes I'd never seen before, empty, hollow. "They found your father's body," she whispered. "Dad had been missing for 6 months. The police said he'd probably run off with another woman, started a new life somewhere. Mom had cried for weeks, but eventually, she seemed to accept it. She even started dating again, a quiet man named Vincent who always wore dark suits and spoke in whispers. But now Dad was dead. They found him in a shallow grave 30 miles outside town, buried beneath an old oak tree. The detective said it looked like he'd been there the whole time. That night, Vincent came over. I watched from the top of the stairs as he held my mother while she sobbed. But something felt wrong. His comfort seemed practiced, like he'd done this before. "Sarah, come down here," Mom called. I descended slowly, and Vincent looked at me with those cold, gray eyes. He smiled, that same crooked smile I'd seen in the corner of our living room that terrifying night 3 years ago. The night I thought was just a childhood nightmare. "Your mother and I have something to tell you," he said, his voice unnaturally calm. My stomach dropped. "Vincent and we've been together longer than you know," Mom said, avoiding my eyes. "Your father, he found out about us. He was going to leave, take you with him." The room started spinning. The man I'd seen in our house when I was 12, the shadow figure who terrified me so much I'd had nightmares for years, wasn't a figment of my imagination. He was Vincent, and he'd been there all along. "We couldn't let him take you away from us," Vincent said, still smiling that horrible smile. "So we made sure he couldn't." The words hit me like physical blows. My own mother had killed my father. But that wasn't even the worst part. Over the next few days, I became obsessed with understanding what really happened. I searched through Mom's things when she wasn't home. I found letters, photographs, receipts. The truth was so much darker than I could have imagined. Vincent wasn't just Mom's boyfriend. He was a hitman, a professional killer who specialized in making murders look like disappearances. And my mother hadn't just been his lover, she'd been his partner. The receipts showed payments for jobs going back 15 years. The photographs showed other families, other victims. And the letters? God, the letters revealed a couple who'd turned murder into a business, a twisted romance built on the destruction of other families. My father hadn't been their first victim. He'd been their 15th. I found a journal in Mom's closet, written in her careful handwriting. Entry after entry detailing how they'd select victims. Lonely spouses, estranged family members, people who wouldn't be missed right away. How Vincent would study them, learn their routines. How Mom would get close to them, earn their trust. And then how they'd make them disappear. The entry about Dad made me vomit. She wrote about how hard it was to eliminate him because I was in the house. How they'd had to wait until I was asleep, then drug his coffee during dinner, then drag his unconscious body out through the back door while I dreamed upstairs. "Vincent was so gentle with him," she'd written. "He made sure there was no pain. That's why I love him. Even when we have to do terrible things, he never loses his humanity." But the more I read, the more I realized how calculated everything had been. Mom had been playing the grieving widow perfectly, even crying at his memorial service while knowing exactly where his body was buried. She'd thrown away his clothes, canceled his credit cards, told everyone how devastated she was by his abandonment. I remember one night, about 2 months after Dad disappeared, I found her in the kitchen at 3 a.m., staring at his coffee mug. "I miss him so much, sweetheart," she'd whispered, tears streaming down her face. Now I knew those tears were fake. She was probably just practicing her performance. The journal revealed something else that made my blood run cold. They had a system for choosing their next victims. And according to the latest entries, they'd already selected someone new. Mrs. Patterson, our elderly neighbor who lived alone with her cats. Mom had been bringing her groceries, helping with her medications, becoming her closest friend over the past few weeks. I found Vincent's notes about Mrs. Patterson's routine. How she always went to bed at 9 p.m. How she kept a spare key under her flower pot. How her son only visited once a month and barely called. They were going to kill her in 3 days. I sat in my room, holding that journal, knowing I had the power to save someone's life. But I also knew that if I went to the police too early, Vincent and Mom might destroy evidence or disappear. I needed them to confess, to give me something undeniable. So I did something that still gives me nightmares. I pretended everything was normal. For 3 days, I ate breakfast with a murderer. I hugged my mother goodnight, knowing she was planning to kill an innocent woman. I made small talk with Vincent when he came over, watching his cold eyes and wondering how many people had seen those same eyes as their last sight on Earth. On the third night, I hid a recording app on my phone and left it on the kitchen counter when I went upstairs. Then I snuck back down and listened from the hallway as they finalized their plan. "She trusts me completely," Mom was saying. I told her I'd bring her dinner tomorrow night. "Vincent, you can come in through the back door at 8:30. She'll be watching her shows." "Same method as usual?" Vincent asked. "Yes. The pillow works best with the elderly. Make it look like she died in her sleep. I'll find the body the next morning when she doesn't answer her phone." I recorded everything. Their casual discussion of murder, their complete lack of remorse, their excitement about the insurance money Mrs. Patterson's son would inherit, money they planned to steal through a fake charity Mom had already set up. But I made a mistake. As I was creeping back upstairs, the third step creaked. It was barely audible, but Vincent heard it. His trained killer instincts kicked in. "What was that?" he whispered. My heart stopped. I froze on the staircase, holding my breath. "Probably just the house settling," Mom said. "Sarah's been asleep for hours." But I could hear Vincent moving. His footsteps getting closer to the bottom of the stairs. I had seconds to act. I rushed up to my room, dove into bed, and tried to control my breathing. A minute later, my door opened. Vincent stood there in the darkness, watching me pretend to sleep. He stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Finally, he closed the door and went back downstairs. I waited until I heard his car leave before I allowed myself to breathe normally again. The next morning, I called Mrs. Patterson. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Sarah from next door. I'm worried about you. I think someone might try to break into your house tonight." She laughed. "Oh, honey, don't worry about me. Your mother is bringing me dinner tonight, and she's such a dear. I feel so safe when she's around." My stomach twisted. "Mrs. Patterson, please listen to me. You're in danger. You need to call the police and stay somewhere else tonight." "Sarah, what's wrong? You sound upset. Should I call your mother?" "No," I said too quickly. "Please, just trust me. Something terrible is going to happen if you stay home tonight." There was a long pause. Then, "Are you feeling all right, dear? Maybe you should talk to someone about these fears you're having." She hung up on me. I realized then that no one would believe a teenage girl over my mother, the respected nurse who volunteered at the food bank and sang in the church choir. I had to take more drastic action. That evening, as Mom prepared Mrs. Patterson's last meal, I made my own preparations. I took my father's old baseball bat from the garage and hid in Mrs. Patterson's backyard behind her garden shed. At exactly 8:30, Vincent appeared. He moved like a shadow, professionally silent as he approached the back door. He had Mrs. Patterson's spare key in his hand. I watched him enter the house through the kitchen. A few minutes later, I saw Mom's silhouette through the living room window. She was talking to Mrs. Patterson, probably keeping her distracted while Vincent positioned himself. I couldn't let them kill her, but I also couldn't confront them directly. Vincent was a trained killer, and I was just a 17-year-old girl with a baseball bat. So I called 911. 911, what's your emergency? There's a break-in at 847 Maple Street. I can see 2 intruders inside. They have weapons. The homeowner is elderly and in immediate danger. Units are on their way. Are you safe? I'm hidden outside. Please hurry. The police arrived within 4 minutes. I watched from behind the shed as they surrounded the house with flashlights and drawn guns. "This is the police. Exit the building with your hands visible." Through the window, I could see Vincent and Mom freeze. Mrs. Patterson looked confused, still sitting in her chair with the dinner Mom had brought. That's when Vincent made his fatal mistake. Instead of surrendering, he tried to run. As he bolted toward the back door, I stepped out from behind the shed with my baseball bat raised. "Going somewhere?" I asked. The look in his eyes when he saw me, his victim's daughter, the witness he thought was safely asleep, was pure terror. For the first time in his life, Vincent the professional killer was the one who was afraid. I realized I was living with monsters, but I also realized something else. I had power they didn't know about. See, 3 years ago, when I'd seen Vincent in our living room and Mom had begged me not to scream, I'd been so terrified that I'd grabbed my phone and started recording. I'd been trying to call 911, but I'd accidentally opened my camera app instead. I'd captured everything. Vincent standing over what I now knew was my father's unconscious body, Mom helping him lift Dad's limp form, and most importantly, their conversation about where they were going to bury him. "The old oak tree by Miller's Creek," Vincent had said. "Same place we put the others." I kept that video all these years, thinking it was just a strange nightmare I'd somehow recorded. But now I knew it was evidence of murder. He tried to push past me, but I was ready. The bat connected with his shoulder, sending him sprawling onto Mrs. Patterson's back porch. "Sarah!" Mom's voice screamed from inside the house. She'd seen everything through the kitchen window. The police swarmed the backyard. Vincent was on the ground, clutching his shoulder and looking at me with a mixture of pain and disbelief. "You little bitch," he whispered. "You have no idea what you've done." "I know exactly what I've done," I replied as the officers handcuffed him. "I stopped you." Inside the house, Mom was trying to explain to the officers that this was all a misunderstanding, that she was just bringing dinner to a friend. But Mrs. Patterson, finally understanding what had almost happened, was telling them about the strange questions Mom had been asking about her routine, her medications, her family. She wanted to know everything, Mrs. Patterson said, her voice shaking. "When I slept, when I woke up, when my son visited, I thought she was just being caring, but now..." When they searched Vincent's car, they found a bag with rope, plastic sheeting, and surgical gloves. In Mom's purse, they found a fake ID and a bottle of sleeping pills that weren't prescribed to her. But the real evidence was on my phone. The recording from the kitchen, their casual discussion of murder. And the old video from 3 years ago, the one that would lead them to my father's body and all the others. At the police station, I sat in an interview room with Detective Morrison and played the recordings. His face grew darker with each revelation. "Sarah, do you understand what you've uncovered here?" he asked. "This isn't just about your father. This could be one of the largest serial killing cases in state history." Over the next few weeks, as the investigation expanded, the true scope of Vincent and Mom's crimes became clear. They'd been killing people for 15 years, targeting the vulnerable and lonely. They'd stolen identities, emptied bank accounts, collected insurance payments. They'd turned murder into a profitable business. The media called them the caregiver killers. Mom's nursing background and volunteer work had given her access to elderly patients, lonely widows, people who trusted medical professionals. Vincent had provided the expertise and the muscle. But what haunted me most wasn't the number of victims or the money they'd stolen. It was how normal our life had seemed. How Mom had packed my lunches and helped with homework and attended parent-teacher conferences, all while planning the deaths of innocent people. During the trial, she tried one last manipulation. She took the stand and sobbed as she talked about being a single mother, trying to provide for her daughter, falling under the influence of a dangerous man. "I never wanted any of this," she cried. "Vincent threatened to kill Sarah if I didn't help him. Everything I did was to protect my daughter." It was a good performance. Some of the jurors looked sympathetic. Then the prosecutor played my recordings. "She trusts me completely," Mom's voice echoed through the courtroom. I told her I'd bring her dinner tomorrow night. Her face crumbled as she heard her own words, her own excitement about planning Mrs. Patterson's murder. When they played the video from 3 years ago, showing her helping Vincent move Dad's body, she finally stopped pretending. She looked directly at me across the courtroom, And for the first time since this all began, I saw the real her. Not the loving mother, not the grieving widow, not the manipulated victim. I saw a killer. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours. When they returned with guilty verdicts on all counts, I watched Vincent's composure finally crack. He turned to my mother and screamed, "This is your fault. Your psychotic daughter destroyed everything." Mom just sat there, staring at me with those cold, empty eyes I'd seen that night 3 years ago. But the biggest shock came during sentencing. The judge revealed that the FBI had been investigating similar murders in 3 other states, murders that matched Vincent and Mom's pattern exactly. They'd been killing people across the country, not just in our town. The final victim count was 27 people. 27 families destroyed by the woman who used to braid my hair and make me pancakes on Sunday mornings. Vincent got life without parole. Mom got 25 years to life. But here's what still haunts me the most. 2 weeks after the sentencing, I received a letter in prison mail. It was from Mom. "My dearest Sarah," it read, "I hope you understand that everything I did was for us. The money, the planning, it was all to secure our future together. Vincent was supposed to be temporary, just until you were old enough to help me with the business. You were always going to be my partner. You have the same instincts I do, the same intelligence. I saw it when you hunted us down, when you played that game of pretend for 3 days. You're more like me than you want to admit." I burned that letter immediately, but her words stayed with me. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if she was right. If there's some part of her darkness living inside me. If that's why I was so good at lying to them, at planning their downfall. Then I remember Mrs. Patterson's grateful hug when she thanked me for saving her life. I remember my father's laugh, the way he used to sing off-key in the shower, all the ordinary, beautiful moments Mom stole from him. As they led her away in handcuffs that final day, she looked back at me one last time. Her eyes weren't empty anymore. They were full of something I recognized from that night 3 years ago. Fear. "Don't scream, please," she whispered, just like she had when I was 12. But this time I did scream. I screamed for my father, for the 27 victims, and for the little girl who'd been living with killers and didn't even know it. The truth had finally set us all free. If this story affected you, please leave a like and subscribe for more true crime cases. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever discovered something shocking about someone you trusted?